Hey everybody, welcome back to Hellbrent for Leather. I'm doing something a little different this week. Last episode we had Tammy on talking about some prog power things that we've experienced over the years, some cool ass sets and good times, bad times, so on and so forth. That was a really fun episode. I really quite enjoyed that. To those of you who may be new who are tuning in due to that episode, I really appreciate it. I hope you stick around. So, what I'm gonna do tonight is I want to talk about something that happened many years ago, 2008 to be exact. There was an event that I got invited to be a part of called Rocklahoma. It's been going on every year. That wasn't the first year. It had gone on for a few years before that, maybe even longer. I'm not sure. But I got involved due to Lance King, a buddy of mine who owned Nightmare Records and was in a few bands. And he got an invite to pay a pretty substantial amount of money to sponsor a stage down there that he wound up sponsoring with a couple of other companies. And they called it the Tri-Label stage because it was 3 different labels that were sponsoring the same stage. And so I got to go down there and do that, and it was absolute hell for about a week. I think I was down there 5 days. And I had one of the worst weeks of my life doing it. I had some really fun times throughout and sporadic times, but I almost died. A few people did die, at least 2 that I remember. I almost drowned. I mean, it was not a good week on the whole. But I have some pretty cool memories from it. So when I got back, I scribbled down my thoughts the best I could into a Word document, and I saved it for years. And I've gone back and read it every 3, 4, 5 years. I've read it just to kind of refresh myself on what happened, just because it's a story that I tell from time to time. But I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for a show. I didn't do one last week. I don't know. I didn't have anything to talk about. I was thinking about doing a Judas Priest show and talking about the set they did at Bloodstock and such. I want to say it was this past weekend. It may have been... No, it wasn't this past weekend. It was last weekend. And I may get back to that. I may bundle that into when I see them next month, just because it'll be the first big show I've gone back to since COVID happened. And I'm really looking forward to it. I hope it doesn't cancel or something else precludes me from being able to go. But so I was thinking, and I decided that I want to read this document to you guys and just kind of comment on it throughout. It's 11 pages, and it details everything that happened during that week that I could remember from when I got home. Because I got home and I went to sleep, and then I just took a mental dump on a Word document to try to get all of my thoughts onto paper so that they would not be forgotten over time, because it is certainly a story to tell. So, without any further ado, or delay, rather, what the fuck? Without any further delay, here is my story of Rocklahoma 2008. Well, everyone, now that I've had a chance to sleep about 15 hours and get back into the mindset of home, here is my recap of the hell week that was Rocklahoma. Now, don't get me wrong, it may come across from some of my writings that I didn't have any fun at all. That's simply not true. I had a blast at certain times. At others, I was miserable and wanted nothing more than to come home and get back to normal. So, here are the events as perceived by myself. I will be posting facts. I will be posting opinions. Regardless of my rants/accounts, this is all how I saw it, and I will not be changing my mind or perceptions on anything that I write. This will be my first and final draft, as I want to write all of this down as it's still fresh in my mind. It all started being this weird, incredible, fucked up journey about 2 weeks ago when I got an email from my good friend Lance King owner of Nightmare Records and vocalist of Avian and Crucible. He sent me an email saying he was trying to find some people who could help him out with representing Nightmare Records to some bands as well as media outlets. My first response was absolutely. And then I got to thinking about my financial situation. Imagine that. I never think about my funds. And then I told him I really appreciated the offer, but I was going to have to turn it down because of money. Being gone to Oklahoma for a week would not help me reach the goals that I'm trying to achieve at this point in time. So I thought that was over. I got an email back a couple hours later where he suggested different options to get me down there, saying he really needed me and that he always really appreciated my hard work in the past. Well, needless to say, he told me some things that I wanted to hear, and I got on the ball about trying to look for a bus ticket to get down there. Got a bus ticket booked from St. Paul, Minnesota to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it seems that things were falling into place. Well, it was now a few days before I would be leaving. I had all things in place at this point. My friend Josh, who lives in Tulsa, along with his wife Jennifer, allowed me in their home for a few nights, as well as offered to get me out to the festival grounds and then back again when the time came. I got all of my loose ends tied up at work, got a schedule made up that didn't include me for once, and I got all of the orders made that I could before I left. My bus was due to leave at about 1:50 p.m. on July 7th, and it was due to arrive in Tulsa at about 5:05 a.m. the next morning. Well, this is where things started to fuck up at first. One of my employees, Ryan, was nice enough to get me to the bus station with plenty of time to spare on Monday. Got to the station, got my tickets picked up, and waited until the bus finally came, about 20 minutes late. Now, the first driver that we had seemed to know what he was doing. He got us all the way to Des Moines before he was relieved by the next driver. Everything was going semi-okay at this point. The new driver got us to Kansas City through some pretty heavy rain, but Kansas City is where the fun started. First of all, a bus ride is never fun. This was my first. I was warned of this beforehand by an employee of mine who takes some trips out to California every so often, so she knew what was up. This ride had its fair share of loud fucking people who thought that this bus was their own personal party vehicle. Yeah, you know the type. And for a while, I wanted to go to prison for murder, as I was about to kill these people. Finally, we arrived in Kansas City, and what a hell I'd fallen into. First of all, it was 11-something at night. We were all tired, ill, cranky, what have you. And the bozos working the stations were morons to top all morons. This one huge African-American guy who was one of the baggage handlers just needed to calm the fuck down. I understood that he was in a bad mood. Hell, we all were. And if I had to deal with this shit on a daily basis, I'd be ready to kill too. But he was taking his anger out on people that didn't really deserve it. There was this one old lady in particular who, after we had all been locked inside the depot, yes, locked in, she was trying to find a place to sit down because she'd been resting up against her walker for some time and her legs were about to give out. She wasn't being loud or vocal about it. She was actually being quite nice, just simply asking if there was a place where she could sit down, and the guy was being a royal dick to her to the point where we all told him to lay off of her. He finally escorted her outside where she could sit down. To make matters worse, the line had been forming to get on the buses was completely disorganized and everyone was screaming about line cutters, etc. I just put in my earbuds and kept listening to music, trying to drown out these fucking retards. Finally, it came back to the time to get back on the bus, and it was a mad dash for the door, as several of us had already been on this particular bus and had stuff in the seats where we were sitting. I was going to be goddamned if I was going to let one of these fucking idiots who had been screaming at me for line cutting when I was put in line at that spot take my spot. Fuck them and the quite literal bus they rode in on. So we all dashed for the bus, and I got there pretty much first after finding a secret way out of the station. I got in my seat. This guy sits down beside me. Thankfully, he had been on the bus beforehand, and I knew him so far not to be one of the vocal yelling morons. So I told him he could sit there. He started talking to me about how this trip was a nightmare so far, and we quickly made friends because he and I had the same opinion about this operation thus far. Never travel Greyhound if you can help it. We finally get out of the bus station with a new driver, and we get about 20 minutes down the road when he decided to tell us all that he was turning around and going back to the station because he forgot his luggage at the driver office. Fucking idiot. We were already behind schedule, tired, ill as hell about the entire fiasco at the station, and now this moron decided to forget his luggage and turn around to go get it. I almost snapped. So we finally get back to the station, and he tells us all to sit tight, and he rushes off into some side office and comes back with his luggage. He was trying to laugh it off, but we weren't having it. Thankfully, he just shut up and kept driving. Editor's note real quick, this is Brent in the present day speaking. I remember this now. I did not read this today beforehand, because I wanted it to be just kind of new to me as it is new to all of you. And I remember this dipshit, and I just got enraged all over again by having read that. Back to the story. We finally got to Tulsa about an hour and a half late, at about 6:30 a.m., and my buddy was driving just about then to pick me up and take me back to his house. He had to go to work, so he dropped me off, let me in, showed me around quickly. I immediately headed for his couch to get some sleep to prepare for what I thought was going to be a fun week. I called Lance sometime around midday to find out where he wanted me at the festival grounds and when he wanted me, and he said sometime that night would be excellent. So I got up, showered, got all my stuff together, and Josh and his wife and I hung out for a little while before we started to head over. Josh had a nice tent and air mattress he was letting me use, as I didn't have a fancy RV or anything like that to stay in for the week, and didn't have the money for a hotel room. We got to the grounds, and it looked like the bottom was about to fall out. Josh helped me set up part of the tent, and then he wanted to get back to Tulsa, which was a good 45 minutes away, before the rain came. So I wished him good luck, we said our goodbyes, and he was on his way. Now, I'd been in Boy Scouts for about 6 years, and I figured there was no tent on this earth that I couldn't set up. I was wrong. This tent was a complicated son of a bitch, and I finally figured it out just as it looked like it could have rained any second. So I called Lance and asked him if he'd come give me a hand finishing it real quick, and he met me at my camping spot, and we got it up in no time. Got the tent up, got the rain fly on it, and so forth. We decided at this point it'd be a good idea to ride around on his golf cart that he had rented for the week, just to check out the grounds and such. We got all the way on the other side of the grounds, and I told him I'd walk back, that I wanted to look around and get familiar with everything. About halfway back to my tent, you guessed it, the bottom fell out. It started raining harder than I'd ever seen it rain before. I got back to the tent, just drenched, happy to be back in my nice, big, dry tent. I could not have been more wrong. I got back and my tent was semi-wet on the inside, and I could see one place where the rain fly was just not covering the mesh that made up the outside of the tent, and the rain was just pouring into that spot. So I quickly ran back outside of the tent, patched that part up the best I could, and tried to lay down to go to sleep. It was like Chinese water torture. The rain kept coming in various spots, and I was so mad that I was damn nearly crying in frustration. So finally put my suitcase up on the bin that the tent and the mattress came in, and my other stuff up on the mattress with me, covered it up under both blankets, and tried to get some sleep. I woke up several times throughout the night, drenched in sweat and rain. My blanket, sheet, air mattress, suitcase, pile of dirty clothes, pretty much everything I had with me, save for the laptop, were just soaked. Thankfully, Lance asked me if he could use my laptop and kept it with him and his family in their little RV pop-up. So starts the beginning of my own personal hell, in which life plays stupid tricks on me for the next week. I wake up Wednesday morning, still bitter about the night before, but my outlook on the week was not quite soured yet. I managed to find some halfway dry clothes in the bottom of my suitcase, put them on, unzipped my tent, and the first thing I did was step into a huge pile of mud that had gathered right in front of the tent. I got out of the tent and saw this guy standing about 20 feet from me, overlooking a little gully in a field that was down the hill from me. I just casually said hello, and he turned around and came walking over towards me. He told me to follow him over to where he was and showed me a huge flowing river and lake that was down there. I didn't really think much of it until he told me it was a dry field out there. I finally clicked at that moment how much it had actually rained and what I was in for the rest of the week. He asked me if I'd stayed dry the night before during the rain, and I'd asked him to follow me to my tent where I showed him just how dry I had been that night. He asked what had happened, and I told him that the rain fly did a poor job of keeping the rain blowing out of the tent and off of my head. He said that he might have a tarp laying around that we could put up over my tent to keep the rain out if it rained again, and introduced himself as Kim. We quickly made friends and went off in search of said tarp. We walked over to his RV, and he introduced me to his friend Billy. Come to find out, they were both working different food and drink stands around the festival for the week, and both turned out to be really helpful, cool fucking guys. Billy told Kim that the tarp was probably in the burger stand, and we went across the campground to the festival grounds and found his stand. We opened it up, and there was the tarp. It was a good thing that we got there because the top had blown off the stand. Not the actual roof, but the sign advertising what it was. And I helped Kim put it back up. We also discovered that the power going to the stand was not working as well, and got the electricians out there to look at it. My guess, things happen for a reason, because had I not been rained on in my tent, we wouldn't have fixed this problem either before they had opened. So I told them goodbye for the moment and went back to set up my tarp. It was now mid-afternoon on Wednesday, and Lance had found me and gave me my credentials. Now, this was my first happy surprise. I thought that I was only going to have a little VIP bracelet that would get me into the festival and such, but Lance handed me an all-access backstage pass. I was like a kid in a candy store. I felt that I had hit the big time by now. So at this point, I had my tent open trying to dry it out and really had nothing else better to do. So I walked backstage, flashed my pass to show that I was supposed to be there, and immediately headed for the beer cart and started drinking all the free beer that I could stand. I shit you not, I loved it. And then there was a tent called the Artist's Tent. Free beer for artists and guests. So I took full advantage of this. I didn't drink enough to get drunk, as I had work to do, so I thought. So I only drank a few to get buzzed, and it was only Miller Lite anyway. So I had a few beers and heard things getting started. So I had a few beers. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. So I had a few beers and heard things starting to get started at our stage, the South stage, the North stage, and sound check on the main stage. So I made my way over to the stage to see what was going on. After watching the band, I forget who it was, I've since lost my schedule due to it being completely soaked, I headed over to the main stage. I was delighted to see that Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp was exactly what I thought it was. On stage, all at once, was Mark Slaughter of Slaughter, and Vinnie Vincent Invasion, David Ellefson of Megadeth, Kip Winger of Winger, Elliot Easton of The Cars, Alan White of Yes, and a few others whose name I could not remember. Jammed out to the likes of Aerosmith, Humble Pie, etc. I was lucky enough after the jam to get to meet Mark Slaughter and David Ellefson. I thought that maybe the worst of the week was over. So on our stage that night, again, the tri-label stage, there were two bands that I really wanted to check out, Overloaded and Downtread. Both were quite good, and I was glad that I had been able to check them out. Then I made my way over to the North stage later on in the night to check out THC, Texas Hippie Coalition, which were basically a really good heavy metal hard rock Pantera type band, while not trying to be direct ripoffs. So after the All-Star Jam, Firehouse hit the stage. They played a few songs and then dedicated their next song to famed producer Terry Date, who was there, and who had evidently produced one of their albums, along with Dream Theater's first album and many more. Firehouse was okay, but I was never really a fan, so I kind of wandered around during their set. Next up was Jackal, who I'd never been a fan of musically, but their stage antics couldn't be beaten. Jesse James and that fucking chainsaw, man. I've never laughed so hard at a band before in my life, but this was in a good way. He was a genuinely entertaining frontman and never really knew... He was a genuinely entertaining frontman and really knew how to work the crowd. From almost chugging a full bottle of Crown Royal to being hung in a harness 20 feet off the stage while slinging the chainsaw around, the man never stopped until they were finally done with their set and got off stage. Finally, Rat hit the stage. And while I was never a huge fan, they were entertaining, and I watched about half their set. The night was pretty much over at this point, and I wanted to try to get some sleep. All was fine and good in that department, with the exception that my tent was still soaked on the inside. The humidity's not your friend when you're trying to dry out stuff. And some morons were beating on my tent at 3 a.m., yelling drunken rants and running off. When was the fun supposed to begin? Now, already soured from the night before, someone thought it was cute to switch Bang Tango with Faster Pussycat and not tell anyone. I missed one of the bands I really wanted to see, being Bang Tango, and had to endure a few minutes of Faster Pussycat while trying to get out of speaker range for them. I've never been a fan. The day was now Thursday, and I just wanted to see some good bands and try to have a good time. The job that I was supposed to be doing had pretty much fallen through at this point. All of the media that I was supposed to be introducing to the bands had decided that they had better things to do at this point, I guess, and I kept getting mixed answers from everyone in the production office as to what to do. So I kind of threw my hands in the air and said, fuck it at this point. If I didn't really have a job to do, I was going to at least try to enjoy myself. I was already here. So it was a good night for our stage, having befriended Gons and the rest of the guys from the Bone Shaker earlier on Wednesday. They wanted me to come check them out during their set, and I was not disappointed by doing so. They were a good hard rock band and definitely seemed to be glad to be there and playing in front of a mid-sized crowd at that point, maybe 75 to 100 people. I congratulated them after their set as it seemed like the crowd was pretty into them. Later on in the night was 6 Minute Century and Pound. Having been a fan of both bands for some time before this festival, I was looking forward to seeing both bands and neither disappointed at all. I was happy that I watched them. As for the main stage on Thursday night, there were several bands that I wanted to see. House of Lords was first, only ever having heard about them but never having heard anything from them. I was told that I'd like them. They sounded great, and I definitely wanted to look into some of their stuff to familiarize myself with them if I were to ever see them again. And although I'm not a fan of Enough is Enough, I did enjoy watching Chip ride around on his rented golf cart all weekend raising hell with anyone who would take him in. He was a funny son of a bitch, and I was cracking up while he was hauling ass on that little cart of doom. LA Guns hit the stage next, and I was semi-curious to see them, and wasn't all that impressed, but you have to understand, I was never a big fan of the end of metal and hard... I was never a big fan of this end of the metal and hard rock spectrum of the 80s. They were a fun band to watch, but that was about it. Next up were two of the main reasons I came to the festival in the first place. The first of the two was Dokken. I got to hang out backstage while Don was doing his interview with Eddie Trunk before the show, and he was as nice as ever. Second time I had met him. Dokken hit the stage, and it's pretty much a religious experience for me. I love this band more than words can express, and being in front and center front of thousands of people for it was just amazing. After Dokken, I headed backstage where I was lucky enough to meet Mike and Bobby of Halford and Sebastian Bach, Metal Mike and Bobby Jarzambek. It was a big wish of mine to meet both of these, and I was ecstatic that I got to. Both were very genuinely nice people, and also seemed interested in what I had to say. I have nothing but good things to say about either of them. It pretty much shot down any of my Halford solo albums in the near future, which broke my heart, but I understood it as well. At this point, Halford was back with Priest, and that was going to be his main focus. After meeting and getting my picture with both of them, I wandered around some until Sebastian Bach had his interview with Eddie Trunk. He immediately corrected Eddie when he told him, "Welcome to Rocklahoma," by calling it Bachlahoma. I almost fell out of my chair, as Bach was really playing up the media quite well and giving everyone under the press tent a good laugh. On his way out, he paused for some photos with the press and fans and such, and I was lucky enough to be the last person to get a picture with him. I didn't really know what to say, as I'd heard mixed reviews of his attitude with fans and the like, and so I decided to take a chance. I got my picture, and as he was turning around, I shouted, "Hey, Baz! I don't know what the fuck you're doing, but keep doing it. You're only doing it better than you have before." He immediately turned around, and the only thing I could think was, "Oh shit." And he walked up to me with a huge smile on his face, took my hand, shook it, and said, "Thanks a lot, brother. That really means a lot." Fuck what anyone else has to say. Sebastian Bach is a real class act, and I'll have nothing but good things to say about him in that interaction. I quickly hurried to get out front of their set, and they did not disappoint. Baz and crew fucking destroyed that night, and I loved how they kept doing the Pain Museum songs that had been recorded on Angel Down, as Baz pulls them off awesomely, and it has to feel great for Mike to have his original music embraced by so many fans in a completely different setting. I was very happy for them. After they were done, I didn't really care that much about Bret Michaels, so I left the stage area and decided to walk back to the burger stand where Kim told me he'd be working. I found him and he offered me a burger. It was an amazing burger. I felt well fed for the rest of the weekend, for the rest of the week when I was not backstage eating. He and I shot the shit for a little while, and I decided that it was probably time to get back to my tent and try to get some sleep. I woke up this time to rain, but it wasn't nearly as bad as it was before, and the tent was only leaking just a little. And it wasn't dripping on me this time, thankfully. It was hot and sticky, though. So the first thing on my agenda was to hurry down to the shower area and get a shower before the crowds showed up. I got my shower, put my stuff back at my tent, and met up with Lance. He had me go backstage and try to figure out the media situation for our bands. I went back and we found Rob, one of the key guys in charge of the festival, and he pointed me in the direction of Lindsay, who actually knew what in the hell she was doing. A rare trait at Rocklahoma, it seemed. She was very nice and got with me about what bands should be at the media tent then and such. So after squaring away all the details with her, I figured out what was going to go on in regards to the reason I went down. I now had my official title and such. Media emissary for the Tri-Label stage. I was the person in charge of making sure that the bands got to their interviews and the media spots and so on and so forth. It wasn't a hard job, but it was semi-stressful. There were only a couple of main stage bands that I was interested in on Friday. Those were Living Colour and Armored Saint, both of which kicked some serious ass. I got to watch Armored Saint from the stage up on the balcony, which was an amazing experience. And I took some cool pictures of John and the boys kicking ass. I got my picture with John after their set and made my way back around to see Living Color. After that set, I hurried over to the North Stage to watch Ronnie Monroe from Metal Church do a solo set. He did several Metal Church songs and several originals, which were quite good. I hung out with him before and after his set, as we had met before, and he told me to come by and say hello after the set. He said that he was looking for Neil and I didn't really know who he was talking about, so I asked for clarification, and he told me that it was Neil Turbin from Death Riders. I asked him to introduce me, because I was going to have to meet him later in the day and get him to get to his interview. Ronnie told me what he looked like and that he would be wearing just in case I saw him before he did. So he and I separated for a little while, and I decided if I could find him backstage. Sure enough, standing back by the production offices was Neil himself, wearing his leather cowboy hat and such, just as Ronnie said he would. I approached him, kind of starstruck, as I'm a huge fan of the first Anthrax record, which he sang on. Quickly introduced myself and explained who I was. He warmed up to me immediately, and we made fast friends. We hung out for a little while, and he seemed really tired and decided that he was going to go back to the hotel for some sleep, and that we'd meet up on Saturday. I headed back to the South Stage and watched several of our bands tear it up. Dimension, Banshee, Azrael's Bane, Gods of Kansas, and finally, Crucible. As usual, Crucible fucking destroyed the place. They are all masters of their craft, and it was great to see Lance back on stage again after watching him run around in business mode all week. This is what he lives for. The guys were all in their element, and they were doing quite well. They got off the stage early, as Extreme ran late on their set, and it was time for Triumph to start, so the guys had to end their set. Triumph was not a band that I wanted to see at all, so I headed back over to Kim in the burger stand to talk with him for a while. He gave me another burger and asked me if I wanted to split some beers with him after he closed, as he had a case of MGD. I said yeah, after all the bullshit I'd gone through, I could have used a few beers. So he and I sat in the back of his truck for a while on the grounds and just drank and talked. I told him that it was time to get some sleep, as I had an early start on Saturday. Little did I know what Saturday had in store for everyone. Cut to Saturday morning. I wake up hot and sticky. I put on some semi-dry clothes and headed out for another delightful day in Rocklahoma. If you don't get the sarcasm by now, you're not going to. My feet are infected from being wet for the past 3 days and having them rubbed raw by sandals, flip-flops, shoes, you name it. I'm beyond sunburnt, even after wearing lots of SPF 50, and I'm very tired from a lack of sleep. At this point, I'm just going through the motions and wanting to go home, to be quite honest. I look outside and it looks quite nice. I was hoping by this point that the rain was done and we might have a semi-dry rest of the weekend. I couldn't have been more wrong. After missing Fidget, which I really regretted later, as I became really great friends with them, Odin, and a few others that I wanted to see, I finally made my way over to the South Stage so that I could catch the Jackals. A good while before they went on, I met up with Nicole from Fidget, and she brought me a few beers as a thank you for busting my ass the way I was. I quickly befriended her, Kate, Alyssa, and the rest of the gals from Fidget. We all hung out for a while and talked about how much the U.S. government sucked ass compared to Canada's. They're all from Canada. I finally saw the Jackals were hitting the stage. I wasn't particularly fond of their brand of Brit rock, but I did want to check them out as they were cool guys. Now, excuse me if this is where things get a little bit hazy. This is where the fun really started. The Jackals came off stage, and Lynam was getting set up for their set in about an hour, and the bottom fell out. The sky was clear for us one moment, and then the next moment the rain was damn near horizontal. It was raining harder than it was the day that I got there. We were just standing under the tent behind the South Stage trying to seek shelter. It was Jackals, Lynam, some members of Fidget, Bone Shaker, me, some stagehands, etc. I was standing at the edge of the tent facing west, taking some pictures of the rain, when I saw the stage start to sway. I didn't really think much of it, as I figured it would hold, but then I saw the wind pick up the stage canopy in its entirety and set it back down again, but this time at a slight angle. It was at this point that I knew it was about to come down. Evidently, I was the only person who saw it, and I started screaming for everyone to run out of the back of the tent that the stage was coming down. It was all in slow motion, or so it seemed, and no one really registered what I was saying. So I yelled again, at this time, as loud as I could, that the stage was coming down. Finally, someone realized that I knew what I was talking about and started yelling with me. My first instinct was to make sure that everyone got out before me, and I was yelling, along with this other guy, that it was coming down. Everyone started running towards the back of the tent, trying to get under it. As everyone was exiting it, a girl fell over in front of me. I grabbed her and kept running away from the tent. I kept running to the VIP area, which was about 30 feet away, with this girl in front of me. I got to the ticket window, threw my wallet, iPod, phone, camera, and pretty much everything I had on me that was valuable in any way to the lady inside. I yelled at her that the stage had come down and I was going to go look for anyone who may be trapped. I tore back towards the stage and the tent, fully expecting to find bodies with the way that it came down. I ran under the tent, screaming for anyone to answer me, getting no response. Some other people ran in the tent behind me, helping me yell for people. I didn't hear or see anyone at this point, so I jumped on the part of the stage that I could get to and started screaming some more, trying not to get electrocuted by the lines that were across the stage. It became obvious at this point that everyone had made it out of the stage and off the stage okay. Or made it out of the tent and off the stage okay. But when I looked up, relieved of this situation, I saw the north stage come down in very much the same manner. My adrenaline was pumping, and I knew that I knew CPR. So I ran as hard as I could against the blowing rain to get to the north stage, which was a couple of 100 yards away. I guess all of the adrenaline... No, I take that back. It wasn't a couple of 100 yards away now that I think about it. It was about 100 yards away. Just my little editorial note there. So I guess the adrenaline... let me start back where I was. I'm sorry. When I saw the north stage come down in very much the same manner, my adrenaline was pumping, and I knew that I knew CPR, so I ran as hard as I could against the blowing rain to get to the north stage. I guess all of the adrenaline in the world won't help when your lungs are filling with rainwater after each breath. I made my handkerchief over my mouth, trying to breathe, but to no avail. I collapsed about halfway to the stage in a puddle, with people running all around me trying to take cover. I managed to pick myself up, but knowing that even if I did get to the north stage, I was in no condition to try to perform any kind of CPR or anything like that, and would be more of a burden than anything. I hobbled back to the south stage, trying to breathe in the rain, and quite dazed, not really grasping what had just happened. I got back to the canopy where everyone was gathered and immediately collapsed by the gate. I was wheezing, doing everything I could to breathe. I had a deputy yelling at me, trying to find out if I was okay. I told him that I was just trying to breathe and that my lungs had water in them, just to give me some space and let me breathe. Everyone was in kind of a daze as much as I was, and I had the girls from Fidget trying to calm me down, because I wasn't done yet. I wanted to run around and check on everyone else that I knew, but I just couldn't muster up the strength to get back up and do it. I finally got up and tore off to the main stage again. They were trying to stop me, but I was on autopilot, I guess. I hurried around to the stage area looking for Lance and his family. I finally found them, saw that they were okay. I saw Mike Wilkerson, also of the tri-level stage, and his wife. They were okay. I saw Ronnie, Neil, Bone Shaker crew. The bassist had a sprained arm from running out in the rain, but he was otherwise okay. And pretty much everyone else who I felt semi-responsible for. I finally got back to the VIP area, sat down again, and just started yelling in frustration. I'd bottled up the rest of this week inside of me, and I let it out right there. I was a goddamn banshee. I was mad, I was pissed off, I was scared as hell, and I was thankful to be alive. I honestly thought I was dead when it was falling. I learned a lot about myself when that stage fell. First of all, I was the last one out of the tent, but I was the first one to see it falling. I stayed behind to make sure everyone got out before me. I honestly didn't know I had that in me. Secondly, as I said earlier, I was pretty much on autopilot. I ran back to the stage in absolutely no condition to do so, but made sure everyone else got out okay. I had people saying that I probably saved lives because I started yelling when I did and such. Maybe I did. I don't know. But I didn't know how to react to being called a hero of sorts. I didn't really feel like I did anything that anyone else wouldn't have done. I was just glad that everyone was okay for the most part. I wouldn't have been able to live with myself if I hadn't done something to help ensure that. The real heroes in this situation were the deputies, the police, and the medical crews who were instantly on the scene checking out everyone to make sure that everyone was okay. Turns out the girl that I pushed over in front of me, running out of the tent, just trying to get her out from under the tent. And actually, I don't remember if I pushed her or if she tripped, but she was right in front of me, so it's very easily that I could have pushed her. I don't know. She either broke her nose or her arm. I can't recall. Just another editorial note that I thought about when I was at that point. Back to the story. So the pandemonium was still going on. Lance showed up to the stage with his family after the rain slacked off a little bit, and he said he was going to go get shelter. He asked me where I was going to go. I told him I didn't know, but that I was wet and pissed off, and I'd find somewhere to go if it got bad enough again. The girls from Fidget invited me back to their car to sit in while everything blew over. At this point, it was about 7 p.m., and we were sitting in their car having some beers, and the bottom fell out again. We quickly rolled up the windows and just sat there trying to stay somewhat dry. The rain started to slack up about an hour later, and they finally opened the big doors to the main stage, and Lynch Mob came out on the stage. I really wanted to enjoy them. George is amazing, and I love Dokken, so obviously I love George. And that band is great, but I just wasn't in the right mindset to enjoy any of it. I called my mom and my roommate to let them know that I was okay before they heard about it on the news, and I tried to enjoy the rest of my night. Nicole and I hung out for a while, and then got separated from her when I wanted to go backstage to check what was going on the side stages. No one knew what was going on. Surprise, surprise. So I was happy to find Neil just hanging out at the production office trying to stay dry. I found him and he immediately told me he was glad that I was alright, and we found some beer and started drinking. I was going for broke at this point. I was almost killed, watched people that I care about almost hurt or killed, and I was not in the world's best mood. Not to mention I was freezing because it was pretty breezy despite being June or July. I don't remember at this point. I know it was the middle of the summer. And I was still soaked. I decided just to hang out with Neil for the rest of the night and just try to calm down some. My adrenaline was so pumped that I was shaking. I called Halcyon Way to let them know what had happened. I'd been hanging out with them earlier in the day when they came in, and luckily enough for them, they left about 20 minutes before the stages fell. I asked if they'd have a place to play tomorrow, or they asked if they'd have a place to play tomorrow, and I told them that I was working on finding out for them to call me in the morning. Neil and I hung out for a few more hours. I was oblivious to the bands on the main stage playing at this point, as I didn't really care about any of them, and I just was trying to wind down and have a good time. We finally got an answer from Lance when he knew what was going on. He said they were working on different alternatives about what could happen and such, and none of them really seemed feasible. He said that he had asked the side bands if they could play on the main stage after the headliners, but the festival said that wasn't an option because Queensryche had a 1 a.m. to 7 a.m. load-in. So that took that out of the question. At this point, Neil pretty much understood they weren't going to get to play. He and I said our goodbyes, and he had to get back to Tulsa for an early flight. And I wanted nothing more than to find a dry spot to sleep. Lance made his way over to me and asked me if I was okay. I told him truthfully, no. He asked me if there was anything he could do to help, and I immediately asked him if he had somewhere dry that I could store my stuff and sleep. He said I could sleep in the back of his Suburban if I wanted, and I immediately took the chance. I went back to my wet-ass tent, got my wet-ass luggage, and took everything to Lance's campsite. I crawled in his Suburban, changed my clothes, and it was lights out. I woke up the next morning, sweaty and hot, but otherwise dry. I packed my stuff, went back to where my tent was, packed up the air mattress and such, and left the tent for dead. It was ruined anyways. Josh told me he didn't really care about the tent as he did the air mattress, and he was just happy that I was okay. I took all of that stuff back over to Lance's, went in to find him. I jumped on my computer and saw the story of the stages falling on blabbermouth.net. I took some time to read the article and look at the pictures. It was all pretty much described exactly as it happened. So I found Lance, asked him what he wanted me to do, and he said that the stage crews were actually setting up side stages under the beer tents and finding any and all undamaged equipment that they could use in this quest. I was so shocked to see how many people wanted this disaster to come together. I was so shocked at how much everyone wanted this disaster to come together and have a place for these bands to play on Sunday. It brought a smile to my face. So I called Halcyon Way and told them that the gig was still on, and they had questioned me about the dynamics of the situation and such. Needless to say, they were stoked that they were even going to be able to play at all. They showed up a little while later, unloaded their gear, and I showed them where they'd be. Showtime. They jumped on and completely annihilated for the 30 minutes they were allowed. They were supposed to have 40, but under their circumstances, it was understood. They were being good sports about it, despite being a little pissed off about the shortened set. Then it was time for Shadow's side. Well, someone in that camp decided this was not a good enough solution, that it was time that they announced they weren't going to play. Oh well, their loss and their fans' loss. Stage manager looked at Halcyon Way and asked if they wanted to go back up. They jumped at the opportunity. Already having a decent-sized crowd for the first time they played, they thought they could top it. They jumped back up there again, and this time the crowd had doubled for them. They slayed again and played some songs that they had to cut out of their first set. In all, they sold a lot of CDs and a few shirts. They were really happy with the things turned out for this go-around. They held a signing session, which was one of the most successful for a side stage band throughout the entire festival. I was genuinely very happy for them, as they're my hometown boys, and I've been friends with them for years. We all then decided that we were hungry, and I herded them to the backstage for a food area and beer tent. We ate and drank and walked around over to the production area. Queensryche were hanging out, and Sean and John met a few of the guys who happened to be some of their biggest influences. I snapped a few pics with the guys, all but Eddie, and we decided it was about time to call it a night. They needed to get out of there for an early trip back to Atlanta, and my buddy was picking me up from the grounds in a few hours. So on our way out, we met up with this guy who was wearing a Mortician shirt, and I commented on it. He said I was the first person throughout that entire day who had mentioned to him that I even knew who they were. He and I struck off a conversation, and come to find out, he was actually a college DJ on a DJ on a college radio station in Denver with his son. They did a metal show a few times a week. I got the Halcyon Way guys over there to join the conversation. They gave him a CD and talked up the band a little bit about playing them and such. It was a nice way to end such a hectic day for them. We all said our goodbyes, and I headed over to the burger stand to wish Kim well and told him that I was leaving. After us getting a picture together, I decided to find Lance to get things of mine so that I could leave. I found him, got my stuff. He and his wife dropped me off by the front gate so that Josh could find me easily. Josh picked me up, and we had a long 45-minute ride back to Tulsa. I gave him the short version of what I've got written down here. And needless to say, it made for a good story. We got back to his place, sat up with his wife for a little while, and then we all went to sleep. I got up the next morning, and they were already gone for work. I got my clothes washed, took a shower, and got ready for the ride back to Minnesota. Josh got me to the bus station on time. I jumped on the bus with none other than the fucking dumbass bus driver who forgot his luggage in KC. I just laughed to myself and got myself ready for the ride. The bus ride itself, thankfully, this time was pretty uneventful. And the stop in KC was less stressful than before, but still not perfect. I got back to the bus station, and my buddy Jan and fellow avian bandmate to Lance picked me up. He gave me a ride back to my house, and I sat up for a little while putting pictures on MySpace, and then decided it was time to sleep. About 20 hours of sleep later, I woke up for work this morning, and that's where I am, sitting on the couch in the lobby of my theater, glad to be home, in a familiar environment, and safe again. Would I do it all over again? Not a chance. Am I glad I went? Sure. I met some cool people, made some great friendships, saw some awesome bands, but it was all at a heavy cost. If anyone has any questions that maybe I didn't address in all of this madness, you'll know where to find me. Until my next blog, Brent. So, that's my Rocklahoma story. Couple little footnotes there. Actually became friends with Neil Turbin as a result of that festival. Now, I haven't talked to him in a few years. Well, no, I've talked to him sooner than that, but I haven't talked to him in probably two years, maybe 3. But I did get invited down to a show where he was doing up here, where he was singing for... I don't even remember who he was singing for. It was either Artillery or Onslaught. They were both on that tour, and I just can't remember who he took over vocal duties for on that tour. I want to say it was Onslaught, if I remember correctly. But him and I sat outside, because it was my birthday, so we sat outside and drank absinthe that he had brought and hung out some. Neil's a cool guy. I really do enjoy him. Let's see. Unfortunately, I fell out of contact with the girls from Fidget. They were really cool people. Their music is not my thing at all. They were just a Canadian girl rock band, but just really, really, really cool people. I've never spoken to Kim again, because I just didn't have his contact info. That's an oversight of mine. I should have gotten it. I'm going to post some pictures on my Instagram page of some of these people, because I've got a bunch of Rocklahoma pictures. So I'll definitely post some pictures up for this episode. And yeah, man, reading back through that, what a fucking shit show that was. That's the one and only time I ever went to Rocklahoma. There have been some other lineups over the last years that I was like, man, you know what? I'd like to see that band. I might not be able to see them otherwise. And then I remembered, no, fuck you. It's Rocklahoma in Pryor, Oklahoma in the middle of the summer. I want no part of it. I could be wrong, but I want to say that there was another tornado several years ago there. We never actually got confirmation that what we had was a tornado. It was just really heavy winds. At least 2 people died from what I recall. Not in the storm. They died in front of the main stage during various sets. Someone suffered heat stroke and died, and someone had a heart attack and died. And I want to say those were both on Saturday. One may have been Friday, I don't recall. But yeah, no one died in the storm, thankfully. The girl broke her nose, if I remember correctly, and I think someone broke their arm. But that was it. Thankfully, there were no other casualties in regards to major injuries or certainly not death that I'm aware of. Lance and I have joked about this festival for years now. Just how it all went down, some of the characters that we met. And yeah, as I said in that, there's no way I'd do it again. Whereas with the To Die For tour, I'd do that again in a fucking heartbeat. Are you kidding me? That'd be a blast. As miserable as I was miserable with people that I genuinely liked, and we found some good in it. And I would go back with different... I'd go back with much more knowledge in how to do things better if I could repeat it again today. But if I could repeat Rocklahoma again today, even knowing what I know now, fuck no. You couldn't pay me enough money to do that again. But yeah, fucking Sebastian Bach was... that was a great set. He was really nice to me that night. And then just over the last few years, I've read things about him and listened to some stuff that he was on, podcasts and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, come on. I always said I'd never have anything bad to say about you, and you're making it really fucking hard, Boz. Stop. Do better. I'm trying to think. The rest of the bands, I really never had any contact with again. I don't think I ever met anyone in Queensryche again. Still friends with Halcyon Way, although they have a pretty different lineup now. Sean's not in the band anymore. Zane's not in the band anymore. Ernie's not in the band anymore. And Chris is not in the band anymore. I think the only person that's in the band now that was in the band at that time is John. I think it's a completely different lineup from Rocklahoma now, if I remember who was all in the band. But yeah, just a bitch of a time. I want to say that was actually the last time I stayed in a tent. And I used to go camping all the time, and I think that was the last time I stayed in a tent. Just that week scarred me. I'll do it again. I've got a tent that I bought from a buddy of mine who had an extra tent, but I just haven't used it. Just always had other stuff going on that I couldn't really get away for a few days to camp, especially not with 3 dogs and everything else. So I'll probably cut this one down to a little bit shorter episode this week, since last week's episode was a little longer. But if you guys have any questions or comments or anything like that, you can find me on my Instagram, which that handle, I will get the exact handle for you, is hellbrent4leather, all together. HELLBRENTFORLEATHER. And yeah, come ask, come talk. I really enjoy talking about this, even if I absolutely hated that festival. But I'll be posting some pictures and stuff like that. As always, thanks for listening. Tell your friends. If you know anyone who would be interested in listening to this, you can find us on most major podcatchers. Google, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher. We're on YouTube. I'm on YouTube. And I'm sure there's a few other places where you can find me as well that I just don't remember off the top of my head. But, yeah, until next week, I'm going to try to have Sword Lord on soon enough. Nathan Block, the guy that got me up to Minnesota. And I worked a lot of shows for him. He's also one of the current promoters for Prog Power. I'm going to try to have him on next week. Actually, he was busy this week down in Vegas for a business conference. But he wants to try to be on next week. So, going to try to have him on. Still want to try to have Sean from Cage, Bill Hudson from Trans-Siberian Orchestra, I Am Morbid, North Tail, so on and so forth. All the bands he's in, he's like fucking in everything. Gonna try to reach out to Joseph Michael from Witherfall, see if I can get him on. And yeah, should be a lot of fun. I just got to keep coming up with things that I can talk about solo when I can't have a guest fall in line. So until next time, I have been Hellbrent for Leather. Thanks for listening.